On a pleasant October evening, 3 boys were out on their bikes when a masked man kidnapped one of them. For over 27 years, the community in Painesville searched tirelessly for 11-year-old Jacob. Where is he? Who took him? Find out how 2 unlikely investigators solved a mystery that spanned almost 3 decades. Jacob was born on February 17, 1978, to Patty and Jerry Wetterling. He had 2 younger siblings, Trevor and Carmen, and an older sister named Amy. The Wetterlings were a close-knit family known for their warmth and community involvement. Patty and Jerry were dedicated parents who encouraged their children to participate in various activities and were known for their supportive home environment. Jacob grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other. He attended St. Joseph Catholic School and was an active member of his community. His family lived in a cozy home near the town center, where Jacob spent his days playing with his friends and siblings. He was an energetic and curious boy with a variety of interests. He loved sports, particularly baseball and basketball, and was known for his enthusiasm on the field. He also enjoyed riding his bike and exploring the outdoors with his friends and family. Jacob was a typical preteen who enjoyed spending time with his friends, watching TV, and playing video games. He had a tight-knit group of friends, including his best friend, Aaron Larson. The 2 boys were inseparable and often spent their afternoons riding bikes, playing games, or just hanging out. Jacob was well liked by his peers and teachers, and known for his friendly and outgoing personality. A typical day for Jacob would involve attending school, participating in after-school activities, and then spending time with his family. He would often help with chores around the house and spend the evenings playing with his siblings or doing homework. On weekends, Jacob might go on bike rides with his friends or participate in local sports events. The morning of October 22, 1989 had actually started out as a great day. In the morning, Jacob had gone fishing with his father. After coming back, they watched a Vikings game for a while. Soon afterwards, the boy's dad took Jacob and his brother Trevor outside to play football. That night, Patty and Jerry had plans to go to a friend's house for dinner. They planned on coming back home early as they left around 5:30 p.m. Being the responsible parents that they were, they told their kids that they would call from the friend's house and leave the house number so that they could be contacted in case of an emergency. The parents allowed Jacob to invite his friend Aaron over, so it was going to be a fun night for the 3 boys. Sometime around 8 p.m., Trevor called his parents to ask them if they could ride their bikes to the rental store and rent some videos. This was a common activity for them, and they often walked or cycled to the store together. At first, the boy's mother said no since it was late in the night, but Trevor persisted and asked his father whether it was okay to go. To their luck, Jerry said it was okay for the boys to go, as long as they carried flashlights and would be safe from oncoming traffic. Pleased with their plan, Jacob, his brother Trevor, and their friend Aaron set out on their bikes around 9 p.m., enjoying the crisp autumn air and each other's company. Not long after this, Patty and Jerry received a call that no parent wishes to get. It was a call from their neighbor who had called to inform them that someone had taken Jacob. Patty and Jerry frantically rushed home to assess the situation. Upon arriving home, Patty and Jerry quickly contacted the police to report Jacob missing. The police were notified, and soon the search for Jacob began. Trevor and Aaron were interviewed by the police, providing as much detail as they could about the abduction. Here's their account of what happened. As they were riding back home, a masked man suddenly appeared from a driveway, ordering them to turn off their flashlights and lie face down in a ditch. He asked each boy their age. It was as if he were choosing which boy to take. Since Trevor was younger, he decided he didn't want him, so the man told him to run and not look back. Then he looked at Aaron and Jacob and decided he didn't want Aaron. Aaron was given the same directions as Trevor. The masked man told him that he'd be shot if he looked back. This was the last time Jacob was seen alive by anyone other than his captor. Trevor and Aaron, terrified and in shock, quickly ran back to their home, which was nearby. They were frantic and scared, knowing something terrible had just happened. Once they reached home, they alerted their neighbor, Rochelle Curtis, who was babysitting Jacob and Trevor's 8-year-old sister, Carmen. Rochelle was the one who contacted Patty and Jerry Wetterling to inform them of the incident. The police were notified around 9:30 p.m., and within minutes, officers began searching the area. The search effort quickly expanded to include the FBI, local law enforcement, and volunteers. Aerial and ground searches were conducted, with officers and volunteers combing through the area where Jacob was last seen. At the abduction site, investigators found tire tracks on a long driveway adjacent to the road, along with adult and child-sized footprints. These were considered potential evidence and were thoroughly documented and analyzed. Trevor and Aaron provided more details about the abduction, describing the masked man and the events leading up to Jacob's disappearance. The days and weeks that followed were incredibly difficult for Trevor and Aaron. Initially, they were under police suspicion. Authorities thought that perhaps both boys had gotten their hands on a gun. They had accidentally killed Jacob and were using the masked man theory as a cover-up. Obviously, this was far from the actual truth. What's even more difficult is the fact that both boys were consumed by guilt and fear, struggling to come to terms with what had happened. Aaron, in particular, felt overwhelming guilt for leaving Jacob behind, a feeling that would haunt him for years to come. The community rallied around the Wetterling family, with hundreds of people participating in the search. Ham radio operators, private pilots, and local business leaders all contributed to the effort. The search area was extensive, covering a 700-square-mile region. The Wetterlings made a conscious decision to seek as much publicity for the case as possible. They appeared on national television shows, including CBS This Morning, and local news programs to keep Jacob's disappearance in the public eye. This effort generated numerous tips from around the country. Little did they know that close by where they lived, another boy had experienced a very similar situation. That boy's name was Jared Scheierl. On January 13, 1989, something just as horrific happened to Jared Scheierl, a young boy who was just a few days shy of his 13th birthday. He was walking home alone from a local cafe in Cold Spring, Minnesota, when he was abducted by a masked man. The man pulled up in his car, asked Jared for directions, and then grabbed him, forcing him into the back seat. The abductor claimed to have a gun and threatened to use it if Jared did not comply with him. Jared was then driven to a remote area where he was sexually assaulted. After the assault, that man released Jared, warning him that if the authorities ever got close to finding him, he would find him and kill him first. The assault had a profound impact on Jared's life. He suffered from nightmares, fear, and anxiety, which continued for decades. The feeling that his perpetrator was still out there and that law enforcement did not believe him exacerbated his trauma. Jared was interviewed repeatedly by investigators. These interviews were often intense and traumatic, with one particularly difficult interview on December 11, 1989, where investigators accused him of knowing his perpetrator. Jared's experiences made it difficult for him to focus on his work as a plumber, leading him to leave well-paying jobs. His marriage also suffered due to his emotional struggles, and he became overly protective of his children. As he grew older, Scheierl became obsessed with solving his case, hoping it would lead to answers for the Wetterling family. He realized that his abduction and Jacob's might be linked and began to do his own research. That's when a journalist came into the picture, Joy Baker. Joy Baker is a blogger and true crime enthusiast who in 2010 became deeply involved in the unsolved cases of child abductions and assaults in the Paynesville area of Minnesota. In 2013, Jared Scheierl, who had been abducted and assaulted in January 1989, discovered through Joy Baker's blog that there were other similar incidents in the Painesville area during the 1980s. Baker's research highlighted a series of assaults by a man nicknamed Chester the Molester. Baker also put together many interesting pieces of key information. She realized that around the time Jacob was abducted, 5 other boys had also been taken between the summer of 1986 and the spring of 1987. That's when she came across Jared's case. She realized that Jared had been abducted and assaulted just 9 months before Jacob had been. Moreover, there were shocking similarities between the way Jared described his abductor and the description of Jacob's abductor provided by Aaron and Trevor. Scheierl was living in Alaska at the time but had returned to Painesville. When he read the details about other assaults on Baker's blog, he realized that these incidents might be linked to his own case. This sparked a new wave of determination in Scheierl to find the perpetrator and finally figure out the answers he had searched for all these years. Jared began his research by contacting old friends and other potential victims, urging them to come forward and share their stories. Scheierl also reviewed police files. You won't believe how this information finally came full circle once this case was solved. Now, in 1989, police suspected a man named Danny Heinrich in relation to the abduction of Jacob. However, due to insufficient evidence, they were unable to pin anything on him, and he was eventually let go. Since there were odd similarities between the cases of Jared and Jacob, there was a chance they were both taken by the same man. So in 2015, Danny was named as a person of interest in Jared's case. Miraculously, his DNA had been found on Jared's clothing from the day of abduction back in 1989. So it became obvious that he was the masked man who kidnapped both boys. Now, what's frustrating is the fact that by this time, the statute of limitations had run out, and Danny Heinrich could not be charged for abducting Jared, even though he was guilty. However, the police were able to search his residence, where they made some disturbing discoveries. Investigators discovered 19 binders of child pornography and other related images on his computer. These binders contained between 10 and 150 child pornography images, including images of prepubescent minors under the age of 12. What's heartbreaking is the fact that due to a specific plea bargain, Danny was not charged with the murder of Jacob Wetterling. As part of the plea deal, he would show the authorities where Jacob was buried. So on September 1st, 2016, police were led to the place where Jacob's remains lay. A piece of red fabric was sticking out of the ground. This happened to be the red sweatshirt that Jacob was wearing. It must have been so upsetting for his family to realize that after all these years, a small piece of his clothes had been sticking out, yearning to be discovered. 2 days later, Jacob's family publicly announced that Jacob had been found. All these years, they had clung to the hope that he may be alive. But sadly, Jacob had been murdered just a short while after he was abducted. Danny Heinrich was charged with child pornography, for which he got a maximum sentence of only 20 years. Trevor spoke at Heinrich's sentencing, reflecting on how the event changed his life. On the night of October 22nd, 1989, the life that I knew was stolen and changed forever. This terrible, horrible creature, who thought it was okay to just steal another human being and then murder him out of his own fear of being caught, is and will always be a threat to society. Aaron also spoke at the hearing and described the immense guilt he carried. For 20 years, I lived with a huge amount of guilt from the choices that were made that night. I lived every day thinking I was the monster that night. I was the coward that left my friend. I was the coward that ran away. To this day, he is haunted by the fact that there was a 50-50 chance that he could have been taken instead of Jacob. Heinrich gave heart-wrenching details about what he did to Jacob after abducting him. He drove Jacob to a remote area near Painesville. During this drive, Jacob was crying and asked Heinrich, "What did I do wrong?" Then he was taken to a remote area where Heinrich removed his clothes and sexually assaulted him. Following the assault, Heinrich used a police scanner to avoid the police. However, when he saw a police car nearby, he panicked and realized he needed to get rid of Jacob. By this point, Jacob was whimpering. He whispered, "I'm cold." He just wanted to be taken home. Heinrich made him stand facing in the opposite direction and raised a gun to his head. He pulled the trigger of a .38 caliber handgun, but it got jammed. He fired a second time, and Jacob fell to the ground. Heinrich then buried Jacob's body in a shallow grave. He later reburied the remains about a year later to avoid detection. This isn't one of those cases where we have to speculate what happened. Unfortunately, this is a case where knowing the truth is so much worse than not knowing anything at all.